Yeah.
Let me be clear. I want to touch it with consent, and I wrote it down.
I was waiting for that.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Carrier, and you are watching Atheist Edge.
Just by people having this conversation about what defund the police means, in that sense, it actually has been a successful, albeit kind of not great hashtag, so to speak, but it's kind of along the lines of, I see it as, they probably could have come up with something better, but at the same time, it's having the effect it's having. I think that you probably couldn't come up with a successful one that would really energize the liberal or progressive base that the conservative or right-wing base would like.
I get it. I think I agree with you. I think my only slight pushback is that the right does a good enough job of straw manning liberal arguments. We're just handing this one to them on a platter. I can't tell you how many people that are Trump supporters in Texas text me and go, dude, I can't believe you're voting for Biden. He wants to take all our police away and take our guns.
Yeah, I've had those kinds of like I work with the guy who's a Trump supporter. He's a friend, and I have to be. I can't take offense. And it's funny, we have conversations like that. And like I explained to him what it actually meant. And a lot of what you said actually does kind of get to the root of it. I would say to go for like, look at New York City. New York City during the 90s, well, leading up to the 90s, in the 70s and the 80s, they had some of the worst crime and gang problems you could have in any city in the United States. I think they were in the top 3. And they did a similar concept to what you're talking about, where they shifted to a community focus, where the police became part of the community. And largely because of that, over a 5 to 10 year period, by 1995, it was one of the safest cities you can live in the United States.
Are you sure that wasn't Camden, New Jersey? That sounds like what Camden did.
Camden did a similar thing. Yes, Camden did it as well. Actually, that would, I actually know the representative who did that. So they had a similar focus too. And Camden, it hasn't been quite as successful as New York, but New York did do this. Now, New York has been moving away from it since 1995. And they went back in the other direction. And now, if you look at New York and what's going on, it's basically insane, especially in response to the protests. Like they had an incident where they had marches on the sidewalk and people were sitting in an outdoor dining.
I saw that.
Cops, you saw that, and they rushed the protesters, and they ended up rounding up and arresting the people sitting at the restaurant as well. And while this is not, I would say, overly representative of what's happening in New York, it does give an example of how they moved away from the attitude of we're part of the community to we're a militarized force who is in charge of the community. And I would also go further. One thing that wasn't mentioned, one of the things that we really need to do in order to bring police into line with what we need them to be in this country, we need to do something about the police union. The police union is just too powerful. There was, I wish I could remember the name of the city. One of the cities, they had the mayor, there was some practice that the police were doing, then they wanted a specific kind of training that the police should be doing this, like you're mentioning. And the mayor was like, fine, if you're not going to do that, then we are not going to fund something that you want to do. Union stepped in and they said, well, we're going to fund it until you're out of office. And then when it's out of office, we'll put it back the other way. And this is the kind of action of a union that is just too powerful. So, and this is like a problem. I'm not clear on how you would address that, because you don't want to get rid of the union entirely. Because I'm not on board for totally getting rid of the police union. But I think something should be done about just how powerful they are.
I actually did partially address that in the other of the 13 reasons that weren't read.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't go into the union specifically. But what I did say is, basically, Biden is addressing this in his plan, which is a mandated federal database of police complaints. Because right now, if you and I work at the same police department and you started 5 years before me, you may be promoted as a detective and then end up in internal affairs. And I'm, an officer who's 6 or 7 years on the force, and I end up being involved in an unarmed shooting of an unarmed person, and then you get the investigation. Our kids are growing up together, we're having lunch together on the weekends, and you're my investigator because it's internal. Well, that's a problem. All investigations should be federally mandated, and I'm in favor of that. A lot of conservatives are not. They said it gives the government too much power. Well, what are you doing with your power? You know what I mean? The local municipalities handling it, the local states handling it is not working. Furthermore, I could abuse my power. I could use excessive force and have someone write in and say, hey, David Smalley, broke my nose as he was arresting me. And then I can have complaint after complaint after complaint, 35, 40 complaints. You could come to me as a senior officer and say, hey, man, they're about to have to fire you. So why don't you resign? So I can just quietly resign from LA Police Department, and then I can go apply at, who knows, whatever, San Francisco Police Department, and get hired, and none of my records have to come with me. Right. So I can start abusing other people, and I've started with a clean slate. So another way I address that, which is the same way, thankfully, Biden does too, is a federally mandated database of complaints. So those two things, I think, will take some of the power away from the unions, because the reason they have power now is we can't prove that those officers have those complaints. We can't prove that detective in internal affairs is helping their buddy get out of a murder charge. So with the data being federally mandated and it being a crime to not report those, I think that removes some of the power from the unions.
It would probably help. I can't say how much it would, but it would probably help.
That sounds
but
oddly...
I'm just a white supremacist for thinking of that, apparently.
That sounds, with the police unions, I never knew that, how much power they wield, and to be able to transfer them around like that, the little loophole, it sounds oddly reminiscent of how the Vatican does business, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
David brought up, go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, but their power is in excess to the point where they can just like override local government, and I see that as a problem. The police union should not have that ability. That's just something that shouldn't happen. Now, those are elected representatives, and it's their job to represent the people, and they shouldn't be able to step in and basically and just stop them from doing their job.
David brought up very impressive that you knew what Signal 50 was relating to a mental health call, and also an apology. Time constraints prevented me from going through all. So I should have gave that a caveat that you had more responses to Harris's video. That I picked the 4 most cogent, the ones that kind of resonated with me. So apologies there. And Philip, to David's point on, we on the left tend to give, the conservatives want to straw man us and mischaracterize us. We're giving him more ammunition by giving them misnomers as our slogans and our mottos. And
yeah, but they're going to do it no matter what.
Well,
that's my
yeah,
problem.
but why give them more info? The first point was defund the police. Now, I'm reading from the Oxford Dictionary here. Defund, to prevent from continuing to receive funds. To prevent from continuing to receive funds. It is an objective fact. Defund the police is not the best. I don't know what I'm not a creative type.
I'm not defending it. What I'm saying is that from a marketing perspective, it had the effect that they wanted, that it got everybody talking about. Yeah. In a sense, it's almost an example of negative advertising. So it did have that effect.
It's detrimental, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and the point of the defund title is, as we were talking about, it's about taking certain funds that are allocated toward things that the police shouldn't be responsible for and reallocating those funds. So it's almost like restructure the police would have been a better slogan.
Ooh, see?
Right?
That would be so much better.
Yeah, but these things develop organically is the problem. These kind of Twitter hashtags tend to come into existence in that way. So, like, I'd agree with you. That would be a great little catchphrase to put on a campaign. But if it doesn't catch, it doesn't catch. That's the problem. You have a limited control over what actually. Right. Like with Occupy Wall Street, they put the one image of the ballerina on the bull, and it was like basically a meaningless image, but for some reason it caught. And it went worldwide, and it was like, what did it mean? I don't know. It's a friggin' ballerina on the Merrill Lynch bull. But people loved it. And this is kind of like, I look at that in this way, where it's not that I'm disagreeing with you that it's, and I'm saying it's good. I'm just simply saying, well, that's what happened, and it did have an effect. And could we have possibly had something catch that would have had it would have rung better with the right? I actually don't think so, because anything they would have liked the left, it probably wouldn't have rung with them and they wouldn't have run with it. So it's
Mm.
kind of like, it's like if it appeals to one, it's not going to appeal to the other kind of thing.
And
And
that's
there's not a hell of
that's
a
a
lot
really
you can
good
do
point.
about that. You know, that's just the way we are right now. So
Yeah, that's a really good point that I wasn't aware of. The need for it to be something that will catch on and create at least traffic, which means controversy. So that makes sense.
I think it caused more damage. It causes more damage than the traction that it gains,
It
in
might.
my opinion.
It's
Now,
very possible it
in
might.
to take it
Yeah.
3 steps further, David and Philip, I'm going to take it 3 steps further. I'm going to give you 3 3 more hashtags and tell me if the same rule applies. And by the same token, feminism, which is supposed to be equality for all, but it's got the word FEM in the
Oh
slogan.
God, Jim,
right?
don't start.
No, and Black Lives Matter, which has objectively created a connotation that only Black Lives Matter. We know that not to be the case, but there's the connotation. Could there be a better one? And teach men not to rape is a connotation where, and Courtney hates when I do the hashtag not all, but there will be some back. I know she's already doing. There's that connotation that those who are not raping are saying, hey, why are you lumping me in with the rapist?
Oh, Jim.
Thoughts?
You'd have to take one at a time each year. So it's three hashtags. It's feminism, Black Lives Matter,
and teach men not to
which
rape.
was- and teach men not to rape. That was the 3. Okay, Dave, do you want to go first, or since I spoke for a bit, or it's up to you?
No, it's up to you. Go ahead.
He's like, I don't want to touch it.
No, I do want to touch it.
No, I know, I
we're
know
about
you
to
don't.
talk
Hold
about
on,
David
hold on.
Silverman.
Let me be
He's
clear.
yeah.
Let me be clear. I want to touch it with consent, and I wrote it down.
I was waiting for that.
Oh.
Now you got to cut that. So,
No way.
You go ahead.
okay. So
That's
the
going to go
first
at the top
one-
of the show.
first one
Actually,
the first one was just feminism, right?
right.
Or am I-
The
Just the word
connotation now, Courtney has taught me so much in the 4 years we've been doing the show. Feminism is, in my mind, I see it as I would rather have it hashtag egalitarianism. That's me personally. Take the word FEM in there. We've had this argument, Courtney and I, a million times.
Yeah.
But
And my
I under-
response to that is that cuts out the history and the underlying I guess effect that sexism has on women versus men. So like that you dealt with this with RBG in a lot of her cases that fought cases that were decided on the basis of sex that were discriminatory against either men or women. The case that she did, one of the cases she did was this beer law at the time where women could buy beer at, I believe, the age of like 18, and boys could not buy beer until they were, I think, like 21 or 20 something. So there was a difference in age, and the underlying, so the main point was that men were being discriminated against based on their gender, of being able to buy beer at the same age as women. But the underlying sexism was the idea that women are more demure, more trustworthy, that they can be trusted more with that. And so the underlying societal sexism was also there. And so she made the point, RBG in the court made the point, that whenever you have these things where men are being discriminated against on the law, it usually has an underlying female effect as well, or even more so.
That's
So
what made her.
it's-
That's what made her brilliant, though. She used inclusive language, and it did not exclude anybody.
no.
It didn't make anyone feel.
No. What she was saying was that even if you have a case about discrimination against men, underlying that is a greater discrimination against women. So that the battling of gender discrimination on either side was still primarily for changing the culture around women. So I want to get to you guys' opinions on these, but I just wanted to clarify that like
We can just hit these quick, you
the
guys. You don't
feminism
have to.
thing is a big thing.
Yeah. We beat
Well-
that horse to death, but your quick thoughts on that.
So I see the hashtag feminism as being a useful hashtag. It generally excites girls and women, especially young girls. The only reason I can only think of, and there could be others, and there could be reasons that are interesting and legitimate that I'm not aware of, where someone would say it's not a useful hashtag is if you're denying the history of women in this country. That would be the first thing. The second one is if you were saying, someone was saying, I don't feel it is necessary today, which I have seen an argument that has been presented over the years, especially on YouTube. I don't have a problem with it myself. I think it does its job of getting young girls motivated and out there and trying to fight for equal rights. You could also have the egalitarian hashtag out there as well too. I do have a problem with saying that one has to replace the other. Like, I don't see any reason why you can't have both. There seems to be this overall attitude that something has to dominate, and I don't see why you can't have all of them working together. So as long as they're not in conflict of each other. Black Lives Matter, the hashtag has a lot of history. The founder of it, I don't know if you followed any of his history. I'm not going to get into it here in detail, but apparently he's not as popular as he once was with the movement. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or I don't want to get into a whole thing.
No,
on
I'm
it.
totally oblivious.
My
to that.
understanding was it was two women.
It was two women, but there was a fella who was big and involved in it, and he's kind of, I don't want to get into that. That's kind of a distraction from here. If you follow Black Twitter at all, then you'll read more about it. I don't comment, but I follow it just because I like to kind of keep up on what's going on with it. The hashtag has served its purpose. It's done what it was meant to do. It's had negative that's been associated with it as well. I have a personal history, which, I have my own little problem with, things that have happened. But at the same time, what they're doing right now, I'm totally on board for it. I would consider myself an ally to what they're doing right now insofar as trying to fight for, even if you don't support Black Lives Matter, if you look at what the police are doing on the streets in this country today, which is essentially just an abuse of the civil liberties of citizens in general, then you should at least be an ally just to fight against that. That's my attitude on it. Because what happened with Trump, for example, when he went out with his Bible upside down and they gassed and they assaulted the protesters who were being peaceful, and then they gassed and assaulted the legal observers. And they did it to the journalists as well. And then the Trump administration went into court and they argued that they needed to be able to gas and assault legal observers and reporters because they had to be able to do the protesters. So they didn't want to be blocked from doing that. So yeah, in that sense, I'm like, I support the tag and its existence in the movement for what it's doing. I'm not like, I don't consider myself a member of the movement, but I support what they're doing. What was the third one? Teach men not to rape.
Which really isn't so much a slogan as just
that hashtag
ubiquitous. Yeah.
I would say that's another example of negative advertising that had the positive effect of getting the dialogue going.
Right.
I don't
but
really
does it do just like, on this theme of strawmanning our own, like David pointed out, does that cause so much of a knee-jerk reaction by those who are not, hey, what about, why are you including us in this?
Yeah.
Is it doing more harm than good?
You know what? I don't think so, in the sense that anything you're going to say on that topic, where you deal with the issue of rape in America and men versus women, you're going to have somebody out there is going to complain, and they're going to say, what about? They're going to do whataboutism. I mean, you remember the whole MRA movement that happened during like the 2010s or the 16, and I think it's mostly died off. I don't think you really hear about them anymore, but those people could do a whataboutism on literally anything. They were just like masters at it. So yeah, I understand why some people might be upset by the existence of the hashtag and what it implies and suggests. It never really bothered me personally. it didn't bother. It didn't hit me in a way where I just said, hey, I am offended that this is suggesting that I might do this, because maybe I just thought, well, it doesn't really apply to me in the sense that it's not something that I'm thinking about doing. So if they want to be like, well, we're saying all men have the capability, then yeah, you can argue, well, technically all women have the capability as well. Rape isn't just restricted to one particular act, but I'm not going to like dive deep into that, so I can find a reason to not, so that I'm not personally offended and feel attacked by it. But that's me personally.
Should all advocates of men's rights issues be lumped into that toxic MRA movement?
No.
Keeping in mind that I'm not aware of what they have been doing since 2016. I would have to say, first, you have to define what is a legitimate activist, in the sense that they're actually doing activism and they're not just online pounding out, shit posting or angry posts about men and what they go through. Like, are we talking about actual activists? Or are we talking about just men?
Well, I said advocate, not activist, but okay,
Oh,
we
advocate.
can go. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going to say advocate, then I'm going to say not necessarily everybody's going to be lumped into that, because advocate is such a broad term that at that point I wouldn't want to go, no, that's everybody. Activist, I would say between 2012 and 2016, I can't remember the names, but I can think of maybe one or two men's rights activists who didn't approach the level that they were not deplorable, to use a word that's popular over the past couple of years for reasons that that's because I actually followed their practices and what they did and how they raised money and what they did to each other and how they treated it. Essentially, no, I don't think really any activists did anything between the period of 2010 and 2016 that could be considered great. There are a couple of the older ones that were in the movement that go back to like the 80s, who I would say some of the work they did had some quality work and they did some good. One of them is out of England. I'm blanking on her name, and the other one is here. But I haven't thought of the names of these people in a long time. It hasn't come up. Is that really an issue anymore that comes up anymore?
I don't know individual names. I mean, issues like men's prostate cancer is twice as deadly as breast cancer, twice as prevalent, and it receives half the funding. Now, I don't know individual names, but there are those that are advocating for more exposure for prostate cancer awareness, for instance. Why I don't know what color that ribbon would be, but anyway, I don't want to belabor this
real
point.
Quick, Jim.
We're down a rabbit hole.
Real quick, Jim.
Yeah.
David Smalley has been super patient.
Sorry. Go.
So I want to get to his take on this, but just to clarify, Jim, between you and me, the hashtag you said, teach men not to rape, right?
Yes.
So to me, that, just like Black Lives Matter, is a response to an underlying societal message that rape is a women's issue, that rape is a female problem, that women should be trying to avoid being raped, instead of teaching both men and women to try and be kind to each other and to move away from this kind of rape culture thing that we have. So that's, to me, that's very separate from the men's rights thing, because it's just about how do we as a society address this issue of rape, and we need to include both people in that instead of just putting it on women. So that's my response to that. So go ahead, Smalley.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that, actually, and especially coming, I grew up in a time where that was essentially how it was done. Girls were taught how not to be raped, and that was just the accepted attitude. That's how it was. Like the idea of saying something like teach.
I would like to hear. I'd love to hear.
That's something you didn't do back then. I mean, occasionally you might have somebody who'd be like, they'd say, you know what, somebody has to teach that boy not to be that way. But generally it was just the attitude, how it was.
Yeah. So in 1921, Sigmund Freud coined the term group psychology. And in that, it's this idea that when someone in my group makes a mistake, it's because of some sort of outside source or a simple misstep on their part, and we can forgive them. If someone in your group makes a mistake, it's because you're in the wrong group. And the ego of the group actually replaces the ego of the individual. So this is why you see guys at Denver Bronco games with Broncos across their chests and it's 12 degrees outside, because the ego of the group collectively is more important than the own individual's comfort. And what happens is when someone's not in our group and we want to attack them, we attack the worst that group has to offer. We don't look at the reasonable people and try to find nuances within their argument. This is why Donald Trump is running ads of people setting a CVS on fire and saying, this is Biden's America. Biden condemned the violence. He condemned Antifa. He flat out said, anyone who was violent, I'm not okay with it. They said, but do you condemn Antifa? He said, yes, I do. Fox News isn't playing that. OAN isn't playing that, right? So we want to use the worst that group has to offer. Feminism is exactly like that. There are people who are very reasonable, who call themselves feminists, who say, of course, we should be equal, #feminism. There's nothing wrong with that. There are other people in third and fourth wave feminism who will say, all men are pedophiles, #feminism. And you go, well, what do you mean? And they'll say, well, do you like it when your girlfriend shaves her body? And you go, well, yeah, smooth skin is very attractive. Yeah, that's because you secretly want to have sex with 10-year-olds. All men are pedophiles, #feminism. That's not feminism, but it gets abused and labeled as feminism. And then people on the far right, people like Sargon, for example, will use those examples and then say feminism is a mental disorder. And so
How prevalent is that?
What's that?
Like how prevalent, like that's the thing I have with that is how prevalent is somebody really saying that as a representative of the group of
Right.
of the
No. And that's
it's like when you had in like the 80s where there was a couple of women who were going around saying we should change Manhattan to Womanhattan and things like that, and everybody was making fun of them, but in the end, when it was really like basically 3 or 4 people who were doing.
Well, I think there was a woman here in California. I don't know if it was Maxine Waters or if it was someone that was in the political field who was trying to set a law saying that if a woman has had even one drink and has sex with a man, it could be considered rape, because later when she sobers up, she could say, I wasn't at my full capacity of reason whenever I consented, therefore I was taken advantage of. Those types of laws I will vote against, but then I'm considered voting with the Republicans. I'm called a neocon, a misogynist, and then the names get worse from there.
That's the college law, right? They came up with that especially because of colleges. And
originally, yeah, but it wasn't only going to be on college campuses.
They were going to do it actually as law. I remember that.
Yeah. So
there was a problem where if you had 2 people who had been drinking, then neither one, according to the law, can be considered to be in their full right mind, and therefore each of them could, under that law, charge each other with rape.
Right. But if the person, right, but it wouldn't have been considered a defense that you raped someone because you had a beer and therefore you were lapsed in judgment and were temporarily impaired. Right. So again, it leads to absurdity. And my point here is that feminism on its face is a good thing. And I think anytime people want to talk shit about feminism, they will grab some obscure post from someone who does not represent the whole of feminism and use that to dump all over what feminism is supposed to be. The same is true with Black Lives Matter. Look, they do. Black Lives Matter, period, right? But when we saw the response, All Lives Matter, I thought, how could we just shut down the opposition from straw manning? What if we said Black Lives Matter too? They couldn't respond with All Lives Matter because it's included in Black Lives Matter too. And I wonder, and then I brought that up. I said, what if we just said Black Lives Matter too? I was literally told, and this was several years ago, I was told, we've heard your people tell our people what to do for 400 years. Shut up. And then I was called, racist for trying to help. And I was like, it was just a marketing thing. I thought we were all at the same table, right? I want it to be successful, so I'm trying to offer opinions. I was literally told, you don't get an opinion here, you're white. That's concerning. That's bothersome.
Was it on Twitter that was happening, or was
no? It happened in my studio with a Black Lives Matter activist.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's why I generally don't give advice to certain movements on how to do things, because I see it as they will take that attitude, and I'm not going to say that they shouldn't. I'm just going to be, okay, well, on one sense, they're right. It's their movement. It's a Black movement or a women's movement. And if you
Yeah,
don't
I think
mind,
this is
I won't offer my opinion,
that's where I disagree with you, man. This is our movement. This is everybody's movement. My daughter almost exclusively dates boys who are not white. My family in Texas, when I go back to Texas to visit for Christmas, it's me, my mom, my daughter, and my sister are the only 4 white people there. Everybody else is either biracial or Black in my family.
Yeah.
And there's probably 14, 15, 16 of
Well,
us.
when I say it's their
largely
movement,
Black. So when I say I want the movement to be, when I say I want the movement to be successful, it's about
Yeah.
saving lives. I want it to be successful. I'll never sit on my opinions for a fear of
oh yeah, offer your opinion, but if they shut you down, then just be like, okay, this particular person isn't going to want to hear my opinion. I'm just not going to give it to them.
Yeah,
I mean, it happens. You're going to run into that.
and just like with the last one, the teach men not to rape. You know, sometimes I'll be on TikTok or on YouTube and just scrolling, kind of hanging out, and I'll see a video like white people ruin everything. And it'll be a video from the 50s of a white man doing something terrible to a Black woman, and it's heart-wrenching. I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. But it's hard not to feel like I'm trying to help. You know, I'm a white person. I can't help it any more than you can help your skin color. You don't want to get into the hashtag not all, right? They're right to some degree that we've had kind of a negative impact on some things in some areas not so much. But that the attack on white people collectively is not going to get people on our side. And when I say our side, I mean those of us who want to see Black Lives Matter be successful. And I think the same is true with these types of hashtags like teach men not to rape. I'm going to tell you something I've said one time on my show. When I was 20 years old, I was raped by a woman. I was roofied. I was the drummer in a band, and I was roofied after a show, and I woke up in her bed. I had no idea where I was or what happened, and I was raped. And this is kind of touching on the point you made, Courtney, about things against men are sometimes speaking to women's mistreatment. Here was her response, because I thought she was really attractive. I was kind of into her, and if she wanted to have sex with me, I probably would have that night. Her defense was, when I woke up and I was like, what happened? She told me that we had sex. I felt violated, and I was upset, mostly because I didn't get to choose whether or not to use protection. That was the biggest violation I felt, that she could have put me at risk. And when I was kind of just shocked, like, no one's gonna believe me. First thing I thought, that a woman raped me after a show. And I thought, why did you do this? I said this to her, I said, why did you do this? And she said, I was afraid of you doing something to me that I couldn't control.
Oh my goodness.
So in her fear of me, she wanted to go home with me, but she wanted to go home with me in a safe way. So she roofied me so that I would be incapacitated. That's bothersome. And when I see a tweet like teach men not to rape, that's a little offensive to me. But you know what? If I speak out against it and I say, I'm actually a victim of not only rape when I was 20 years old, but of sexual assault when I was 8 years old. This is offensive to me. Then it's just called male fragility or white male fragility. And then I get bullied from people who are online not taking my past and my trauma seriously. And anytime we select a specific group of people, even if it is the evil white cisgender male, straight male, it's never a good idea to pick a segment of society and say, these are the people we're allowed to shit on without any consequences at all. So while hashtags can be catchy, I think we need to do a better job overall of bringing people together, but I'll never make the argument that social media is the place for nuance.